All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. It's 3:30. My name's Alan Day. I'm the general manager of Brazos Valley Groundwater Conservation District. I'm going to facilitate the next three. So we're going to get started. Our first speaker is Amy Hayes, and she's going to come on up and get started.
All right, and good afternoon. I know that this is going to be a great conversation. Following up a little bit about, if you were in yesterday's opening, you know we had a science communication and discussed how important it is for us to be better communicators. So we're going to start today, and I'm going to give you some interesting facts. I hope you don't mind if I go ahead and do a little bit of day drinking while I give you these facts. Okay, so in the United States, we spend approximately $191 billion on alcohol and drug prevention. So cheers to that. That's a lot of money spent educating people on alcohol and drug prevention. And 178,000 people die every year from alcohol abuse. That evidently, for $191 billion, it might need to be a little less. I think you'd agree. But that's not the end of it, because guess what? Hey, in the United States alone, we have approximately 324,000 deaths that occur because we can't get it right with our food. Hey, that is 324,000 people who die annually because of something that we educate people extensively about. And not to be outdone, I hope you don't mind. Does anybody have a problem with me smoking up here? Okay. Smoking. 480,000 people every year die of something that we've educated people for over 50 years about the effects that happen with smoking. So just in case your math is a little bit rusty like mine, that's over 900,000 deaths that we spend roughly $240 billion to try to prevent. And that probably tells you one very important thing. Adults are a stiff-necked people. They are not just hard to educate. This will tell you it's nearly impossible to educate them. So how many of you have had experience with these stiff-necked people? I've spent 35 years of my career trying to educate people in conservation, and I can tell you they are a stiff-necked lot, but maybe the problem is not necessarily them. Maybe the problem is perhaps us. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today. And I'm going to hope that, guess what? I hope that if you are a stiff-necked person, that today you will open your mind to some of the things that we can do better. And I'm not talking about educating, I'm going to talk about engaging. Adults need to be engaged. And in the case of most of the people that we work with, they're already pretty educated. So the title of this particular talk is Lead Them to Water. So what's the statement? You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. Drinking, not this kind of drinking, but horses, humans, they need to do the drinking, and it's our job to lead them there. So this was not an issue that is unknown. As a matter of fact, in the 50s, a sociologist, Malcolm Knowles, also noticed that it's particularly as they were looking at the United States, and if you know anything about history, 1950 was approximately the time that we began to develop education for adults, known better here in the United States as cooperative extension. This is a time frame in which we really began to say there's a lot of value in engaging adults in being able to change the future by changing behaviors, attitudes, perceptions. And one of the biggest rises in that, of course, in the conservation world was the Dust Bowl. The Dust Bowl taught us a whole lot about how probable it is for us to educate, engage, empower people by going out there and helping them understand the science. That's the beginning of what most of us do today when we science and we communicate. It's built on that model. This same time frame, Niles recognized something very interesting. He recognized that the methodology that we were using to engage adults was very similar to the methodology that we were using to teach and educate children, which that term is pedagogy. So he recognized that, wow, pedagogy, he said, we're trying to do the same thing that we do with children with adults. And his observation and his science said there's actually a different way that you need to educate adults. And unfortunately, what had happened is all of us are a product of pedagogy. All of us are a product of going through a system in which we got to the pinnacle of our education by having someone who was an educator teach us. That's how you learn. K through 16 is you are taken with a guide who teaches you, scaffolds the learning so that you come out with a degree. Now, how many of you would say that you have been at many different engagement events where it seemed like the entire purpose was that that person needed to come out with a degree in about 8 hours worth of slide presentations? Most of the things that we do look very much like a classroom. So what I want to do today is talk to you then about what this adult learning principle brings to the table. Of all the time that I've gone across with science educators, and if you're like, I'm not a science educator, how many of you talk to other adults? How many? Oh my gosh, the rest of you must talk to children. Am I at the teachers' convention? Yeah, no, that would be in your daily lives, like you work with, how many of you work with people? Okay, you don't work with animals, although they are a mammal, so I'm going to say that. But you do work with people, and at some point you wish they'd make a behavior change. Is that correct? Yeah, yes, that's okay. This isn't the Methodist Church. You just go on. Okay, Frozen Chosen Presbyterians, you guys can do it too. Okay, you want to say, yeah, at the end of the day, what we all hope is we're making a behavior change. In the world of groundwater, are we hoping that there's a behavior change? Yes, excellent. Well, I got a thumbs up. Baptists, right there. Go, girl. Yes. So I want to talk about how Malcolm Niles talked about this. Now, I don't want to talk about it in a way that's going to put you to sleep. So what I've done is I have invited the 80s and 90s pop bands to help me make the point come across. So the truth is, if you can't find the knowledge that you need to go to an 80s and 90s pop band because they have all the knowledge you could ever want. So I'm inviting you to walk this way and talk this way as my friends from Run DMC. Okay. Okay, I was hoping this was going to go over. I thought it might go over flat. You just never know, and it could have been a bunch of really young Gen Zers in here, but obviously you guys are going to help me out. Okay, if you can identify all the things of these bands that I can tell you, I have a prize for you, and it's your free ride to a death by obesity. I feel that's fair, okay? So we're going to talk about public engagement, and I'm going to give you Niles' 5 principles and ways that you can use that so that when you go out to do some communication, that you have the tools in your toolbox to actually meaningfully engage adults. Now, I'm going to tell you that I don't have a communication or a psychology degree. I'm a wildlife ecologist and a range ecologist. So if I can do this, you can do this. Okay? So you should feel good about that. So remember, what is the job? Your job today is to lead them to water. Their job is to drink. No wonder we have so many deaths by drinking. It's amazing. Okay, so the first conversation we're going to have is by my friend. Oh, this is so encouraging. Okay, people have their own minds and they want to make their own decisions. The first concept that Niles talked about is that adults, believe it or not, want to be part of the solution. So what is this? When you go to your doctor and he tells you, which he will, by the way, if you're 25, he's not telling you this now, but when you're 45, he's going to have some different new news for you. He's going to say, we need to make some changes. And if your doctor just gives you the report that shows your blood levels and your cholesterol, you're not going to know what to do much about that. So when we tell someone that our water is depleting by 50 million gallons over 70 seconds over 3 years, they're not going to know what to do with that. We've got to begin to know that if you want to change in adults, you need to enable them through their own understanding of self-concept. So they have their own minds, they want to make their own decisions. You can imagine a community who someone comes to them and says, you need to conserve your water better. They are usually getting the information from people who are making the decision to tell them what to do. How has that worked for us? Doesn't really work so great. And we think sometimes it's because those people are so stubborn. We've led them to water, but they haven't taken the drink. But now says, actually, this is because you haven't actually led them to the water. You told them what to do, but that's not leading. And so this is a concept, it is an example that when you empower people to do their own decisions and give them ownership, they're actually more likely to take that on. So if you have a community, for an example, if you have a community that you are bringing education programs to that teaches them how to conserve water, a lot of times we say, well, that's enough. But it's not enough for them. They need to learn how, not just that knowledge, but how to apply it. So in a case example, maybe you're working with a community, they know that they want to do some conservation efforts, you're helping them identify what conservation efforts those could be. So they're learning about these sustainable practices, they're learning about the management, they're understanding that they have a critical state maybe in their groundwater. And they have local authorities and experts to help. So they're learning and they need from you, how do I apply that knowledge? Not just that the problem exists, but how do I apply it? So residents may learn about efficient irrigation practices that are relevant to them, not just general ones, but ones that are relevant. They might be able to reduce some of their waste, and what you want to do is allow them to take responsibility for those actions. So in this scenario, you do bring in the specific things they can do, but then you allow them to begin to monitor that information. So if you bring in a system that says, can we improve our irrigation practices, you want to allow them to monitor that change in practice and be able to come back to you and say, what does that change mean and is it enough? Most of the time, we don't give people enough of the time inside of the learning for them to take control of it, to choose what the different things we've offered them, to take that, try it out, come back to us, and then when you have somebody who comes back to you and you help them through the process, they begin to take ownership. And that is a turning point that now said changes behaviors. You have to bring them to an awareness, but then you have to give them the ability to take control of those changes. You have to be part of the feedback of that, and then you have to empower those that are there that seem to be taking initiative with the authority to help lead others. So you've seen this happen if you are in the healthcare industry. You come in and your doctor's going to tell you 5 or 10 different ways to do something, and it says it's going to come back to me with these numbers. You're going to take your blood pressure for 25 days. You're going to try this thing for 15 days. And together, we're going to have this feedback. We don't do a whole lot of that in adult learning because we take them like children that, just like you did, if you master something, you get a certificate. There's no certificate when you have voluntary learning. So you've got to be engaged in the process and bring them through self-concept. So this one is a little bit different, but that's one of the ways, because people have their own minds, they want to make their own decisions. You've got to empower them that way. Okay, the second one we're going to talk about today is adult learner experience. So this one is about the fact that adult learners, unlike children, come to the table with their own experiences that are going to determine whether or not they take up your piece of information. That experience could be positive or negative. You heard yesterday a reference to we always do what we get because we always do what we do. We don't really want to change that. So a lot of times in conservation, people are doing what they're comfortable with. I see that all the time in grazing. I always put that number of cattle on that number of acres. I always put that much fertilizer. My granddad did too. And so did my dad, and so am I. Okay? So you see this quite often. Well, adult learners actually come to the table with a lot of experience. And so your job is to connect to that experience. Well, how can you do that? You need to make what you're bringing more practical. So when people, for instance, in communities if we're experiencing a situation of drought, and you come to a community, and what is the first thing that science usually loves to do? All scientists actually have 1,000 charts in their back pocket available at any time. If it's not in a pie chart, it's not real. If your colored graphs don't have 3 bars, that's not valid. So when they come to communities and say that, and they want to work on a solution, the communities don't really engage in that. And a lot of people don't engage in that. They value the science, but that's not the engagement piece. The engagement piece, how many of you have ever come into a community during a time when they may be experiencing a drought or something that's critical and said, what do you notice? If I go to a community of farmers and ranchers, they say, you know what? I noticed that my soil is drying up a lot faster than it did last year. I noticed that this year my crop only made 70%. I noticed that my animals are standing almost exclusively at the river. They're going to tell you their experiences that are going to help you walk through that piece. Oh, really? It looks like this year you're using a little bit more fertilizer or you're using a little bit more water. What do you think that's from? They're going to talk to you. And they're going to say, well, my experience leads me to believe that's probably means that I'm experiencing a drought condition. And you're going to be like, yeah, let me show you exactly what that is. And you can bring them to your science through their experiences, not your experiences. That's what we like to do. We like to bring them through by our experiences, by our degrees and our expertise and all the ways that we are good. But learners have experiences that you can take advantage of. And Nal said it's critical in engaging learners to change their behaviors that you need to approach them based on their experiences. So when they do that, then they're able, again, much like self-concept, to take responsibility. They say, oh, maybe I need to reduce my stocking rate. Maybe I need to, if my cattle are really hustling for water, I need to find a way to have alternative water or reduce my stocking rate or other ways that I can conserve or utilize that. The same thing can happen when you work with a community and you ask them, what do you want to do about this? You notice that the rivers that you used to swim in are drying up. They'll tell you, I remember as a child going to this or that place. I remember that spring. I remember that river. I remember that water. What does that mean? Go through that experience with them and empower them to understand what's going on so that they can take that piece of information and actually understand how it applies to their current situation. We tend to do a lot of this with the people that we're trying to engage. We try to tell them why they should care instead of understanding their experiences that have brought them there. The other thing that definitely now said that what makes a difference is this concept of readiness to learn. Okay, readiness to learn is the point in which how ready are you to learn? So what is the most time? How many of you are happy with your health? Okay? Some of you are like, not like this. I saw some half and then some not. How many of you are happy with your financial situation? How many of you are happy with your relationships? How many of you are happy with your jobs? Okay? These are all things that says, are you ready to learn? People are ready to learn most of the time when they face a crisis. You're not going to change your diet till you have that heart attack. You're not going to change your financial situation until you experience a crisis. And people are the same way. So they're not going to change their situation because of the science that you're telling them. They're going to change the situation because they understand the problem you're trying to solve together. So this is really important. Instead of saying, I'm a hydrologist, I might say, how do I solve problems? I help people use water better. I'm solving problems. So people want to know, adults want to know, not just the information. That's what children want to know. They're used to learning like that. But an adult is only going to really engage with you when they have a problem, when the drought's there, when the water's running dry. So being able to help them through readiness to learn timely is really, really important. Has to be timely. Needs to be in the same time. You have some learning or presentation to do that's going to be off the time when they have a problem. They're not going to probably use that information and apply it. But you've had that information and you can say, hey, we're here today and the river that has run for 40 years is dry. There's a problem. What's that problem and what will be the result of that problem? That's probably the piece that they'll engage in. And it has to be very focused. So it can't be ambiguous. There can't be 10 things that you can do. You need to bring solutions that can be directly able to be applied. Very timely, very task-oriented. Which leads us to the next part, which is this orientation to learn. Okay, they're motivated to learn by the extent at which they can solve problems. So you're only going to learn to modify your diet if you can solve the problem of not having a heart attack. Okay, you need to have a readiness to learn that is oriented toward your problem. So if you bring a solution to a community that they can do nothing about, they don't really have that orientation to learning. It's just invaluable information that you've wasted your time on. So you really need to orient them into these areas of very task-oriented learning. What can they do now to change that situation, and what are those exact steps? Adults need that piece of information to engage with you. And finally, the fifth thing is, the last part is this motivation. As adults go through life, the motivation for them to actually change their behavior becomes more intrinsic. And so you want to be able to take advantage of that. There are certain people in your community groups that are motivated by the desire to connect environmentally. Learn how to connect with different groups differently by their intrinsic desire to find solutions. So a lot of times we treat our audiences as exactly the same motivators. Everybody cares about the same things, but that's not true. So you're going to have to learn to read your audiences and find out those intrinsic triggers that as adult learners mature are going to be more and more prevalent. Some of those can be their environmental awareness. Maybe it's the impact on their daily lives. Community and social influence. Lots of people want to be that conscientious leader in their community. And some have a lot of civic pride and responsibility. Those things mature as they go through their decision process. So when people tell me that the only thing that matters to people is money, that's not what this says. It says that you can motivate people through their intrinsic values. And it's worth our time to find those out. So those are 5 things that you want to do to engage. Now says you've got to start thinking about how adults engage and learn. And really, really push yourselves to not rely on the same ways that we did for pedagogical learning. This is a lot, and there's an entire science behind it. But what we found out, and we had a great discussion at lunch, is that 99.9% of scientists have never heard of adult learning, nor have ever been told that there's anything different in the way that they've come through the learning system that adults that they're now working with would have a need to know how to actually engage those adults in a learning experience that's going to change behavior, that's going to, in the long run, reach a goal that we all agree to. So engage those communities by connecting to their water issues of their daily lives. They don't make it very ambiguous. Real life experiences with their conservation really, really matter. Finding what those real life experiences are in the communities that you're hoping to impact, it has to be real. Develop problem-solving tasks. We're going to solve this problem for this outcome. We're going to solve irrigation so that we can do X, Y, and Z. Be very specific to the problem that you're trying to solve and the tasks that you're using to solve it. And foster this sense of ownership. I'm going to give you this information, tell you how to solve the problem, and you need to take that up and run with it. Find those leaders in your area. So these are the 5 different ways that NALCED really matter. And I know this is a short amount of time. It's hard to apply those. This is really just to introduce you to the possibility that we have a long way to go, but a great pathway to work with for engaging adults. I just want to make you aware that adult education and engagement is vastly different than youth education is. And most of us are employing pedagogy where andragogy, this adult principle, is really appropriate. So I'm going to just let you know that this topic is very deep. I do have some more information on it. We have published a book on it. I brought some today just to show you what that is. If you want to get a hold of me, I am on LinkedIn, and also you can email me at my institute. So I know that was a quick recap, but Alan, I'll turn it back over to you to just see if there's any questions before we move to the next speaker.
So does anybody have any questions? We got a couple of minutes here. You can come up to the microphone, either one of the aisles here.
Okay, did anybody get all the bands right? Oh, wait a minute, Hal. Oh, wait, this is not a plant. Hal has a question.
Amy,
Do you mind if I smoke while we do
no, fantastic presentation. I learned so much. I hear a lot of people saying, I want to engage with people, but there was a block there for a while until I built trust. I mean, how does this change when you have trust versus when you don't? And how long does that process take in your experience?
I think that's a great thing. And I think that part about helping people and engaging them with their past experiences goes a long way to trust. Is that if you are curious about what they do and what they know, before you come in and say, you know nothing, and that's why I'm here, that's a message that most of the time happens. So you can build that trust. It goes a lot faster when you have trust. And why is that? Because actually in science, we know, guess what, scientifically, that the most valuable relationship to people is a peer-to-peer. People will take on and believe things peer-to-peer. Expert to learner is a very low uptake of information. Peer-to-peer is the highest form. So the closer you can get to becoming a peer, a trusted source of information, but also the caring person that says, tell me what you observe and know and see, and I value your experiences to try to solve this problem. You will probably find, if you start programs with what's your experience, what are you here today to solve, before you start any scientific talk, you're 50% or more likely to solve that issue with that community.
It sounds like you're coming alongside them instead of a top-down approach, and you're just building that trust a lot quicker.
Yeah, the coming alongside, that's a great way to put it. Yep, exactly.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Amy,
All right.
very much. If anybody has any more questions, I think she'll probably be around. So I'll reach out to her